main thought behind gamification is that the game industry has, it's basically an industry around engagement. It's an industry around creating experiences that are enticing enough to people, intuitive enough that they become fun, and interesting enough for people that they stay with them for long periods of time. I mean, it's a business built around engagement of interactive activities. And it's not a big leap to say, well, there's a lot that's been learned by game designers and by the game design industry about how do you make something attractive enough that someone picks it up in the first place, engaging enough that they start to figure out what to do, and whether you call it addictive enough or deep enough that they stay with it. EA probably 25 years ago, had simple, hot, and deep. It was simple, but it was really hot. It got you excited. It got you pulled in right away. But it was deep enough that you stayed with it. You didn't exhaust it right away. And so it's not even necessarily a new idea. But what is interesting is to say, if you've got a whole industry that's based on attracting people, getting them instantly engaged, and holding their attention for a long period of time, surely that industry has figured out some design tools that can be used for things that aren't games. How do you make, and I'll give you a simple example, somebody doing their home finances. It's not a fun task. And it's a task that makes a lot of people very nervous. It's a task that makes a lot of people feel like they're failures, like first of all, they don't know what to do. Like if you ask an average person, walk me through your financial planning process. But just first of all, explain to me what is a good financial plan. Tell me how you've constructed it for families. Show me how you go back to the average person has got tremendous anxiety around that. They don't know what a good financial plan is. They know they don't have one. They know they're not doing it, and any steps they take to start it just makes them feel bad. Now, partly they may feel bad because of the realities of their financial situation, but it's also they're just not really sure where to start. And good gamification in that case, it's not about candy coating it. It's not about being condescending to people or talking down to it, but it's recognizing that all of us are faced with tasks, whether it's our finances, our health, our travel, our education. We're faced with huge amounts of choices that we have to make in our life, and each of us navigates the best we can, but we all know that we're doing a poor job, that there are decisions that we're making or things that we should be mastering that we're not. So software that's designed to get a job done, in other words, it's a tool or it's enterprise software, classically hasn't been designed to be fun. It's been designed to be productive. But I think the problem is that at the end of the day, it's just people using this stuff. And whether somebody is playing a game or whether they're managing their own personal finances or whether they're at work, trying to track orders or manage customers, we're all kind of wet inside. We all are a bundle of emotions and desires and attention and an oxygen-breathing animal that needs to stay alert. And software that's designed logically just to be productive in a sort of linear, sort of deconstructed way is not necessarily going to get people's full attention. It's not going to necessarily take people who, in theory, could read a 200-page manual, understand every command, and then execute it flawlessly, but in practice, they're new, they're tired, they're hungover, all the different things. Productivity is, I think gamification is a recognition that productivity has to engage both hemispheres of the brain. It's got to engage the whole person. For someone to be truly productive, they have to be engaged, which means their intuition has to be engaged, their emotions have to be engaged, their sense of personal mastery has to be given a chance to operate. In other words, good productivity design, I think, overlaps very strongly with the principles of good game design. Well, one way that companies become vulnerable is when the wave that they bet on becomes so successful that the metaphor is no longer the right metaphor, the powerful enough one. I mean, that's really what happened to those other companies, is that Microsoft said every home, PC on every desktop. Well, they were right. But what happened was with all those computers, the internet wouldn't have made any sense in a consumer world if there hadn't been all those personal computers to begin with. So Microsoft was right, but if you just take a linear interpolation of their vision, which is a computer on every desktop, yeah, it happened, but it turned out that the sort of unexpected consequence of that, which is, and by the way, they're all going to be connected, and this can become a social device. That became the dominant force, much more important than the computer itself. And Yahoo came along and said, wow, someone's got to help organize this stuff. What if we made it easy for people to, yet another hierarchically organized list, made this easy for people to navigate this. And they were absolutely right. It's just that there was so much stuff that after a while simply browsing wasn't a powerful enough way to get it. So it's not that browsing has become irrelevant. It's just not the most important way to access it. And of course, that's what Google realized, is that search was not only a more powerful way for users to access the internet, but search generated a different level of data about consumers, their tastes, and their behavior patterns than browsing ever could. So for Google, what they did was found a verb or metaphor that was not only more powerful for consumers, but was far more powerful for businesses too, because of the data that it generated. So again, each one was built not on the failure, but the success of the previous one. I think that with Facebook, I think the danger is that the more people connect, the more they realize that that belonging is more important than connection. And if I had to pick a word right now for maybe what's next, it's belonging. It's a richer and more personal contextualization of connecting. And right now, so for example, I think Google Plus has been as successful as it has been because I think it did exploit what felt like one of the weaker parts of Facebook, which was you could have hundreds of friends, but it was a fairly flat structure. Now Facebook is scrambling to correct that, and they've done a pretty good job. They're adding a lot of richness and features into how I can start differentiating between different groups, between family and close friends versus acquaintances. It was exactly what Facebook needed to do. I think Google Plus was probably a forcing function. But I think both companies realize it's not simply connecting that's going to make the difference. It's people's ability to contextualize their social relationships. In other words, belong, that's really going to make the difference. Whether or not that becomes the next dominant, where you can say there was a major disruption and that's where Facebook started to wane and someone else came up, remains to be seen, because like I say, Facebook's responding pretty closely, but I think that world is changing. No, of course not. The technology changes behavior. It always has and it always will. A new technology development around communication or any kind of information changes behavior. Being human is too complex for a change of behavior ever to be all good or all bad. And things are changing massively right now. So I think there's probably some massive changes for good, and there's probably some pretty massive changes for bad. I was sitting. Last week we came to Italy a week early, and because we took a holiday week before coming to View, and I was sitting in a cafe. It was sunset. It was looking over the Mediterranean. I had my iPad, and in the little window in the iPad was my sister in Atherton, California, and we were having a wonderful conversation. I was showing her the sunset, and it was just so nice to be sitting there, with my evening drink and the sunset, just talking to my sister and looking at her and just talking face to face. It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal that it's not only possible, but it's a free app. I mean, it's just easy. So that's great. Yet, you walk into a room and you see everybody's got their face buried in their smartphone or their tablet, and they're not interacting with each other. That's not so great. And I think that, of course, the technology is the sort of the backbone of that change of behavior. But like any time there's a technology change, what's really important is the cultural changes that happen around it and how individuals choose to use it. Do they choose to use that technology in a way that makes their life richer and, I'll go back to that word again, more connected, a stronger sense of belonging? a stronger sense of, gee, does it make me a better human or a worse human? And I would say that every new technology is powerful enough that it can be and certainly will be used in both directions. The one thing I do know is, and I think anybody who's even that much of a student of technology changes knows, that it's kind of like Thomas Kuhn's paradigm shifts in science. The real shifts sometimes can't happen until the old generation just dies off. It's not that the old generation is going to suddenly get it and say, oh, I get how video games can be a real positive force for change. I fought video games for 20 or 30 years, but now I get it. That'll happen with some people, but really what's going to happen to a large extent is people get old and die, the new generation comes, and they don't even question it. Like, of course video games are part of our life. We grew up with them. They're great. And of course I know when to put it down and do something else. Writing was very controversial. The printing press was very controversial. Radio, television, every one of these technologies people said was going to be the end of human commerce and human face-to-face communication as we knew it. And the generations figured it out.